Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Luisella Ciani. I'm the director of the European Food Forum, and while we are waiting for Mr. Köhler, which is voting in the committee ENVI, I'm just doing the opening, providing you some information. We are very happy to start this first event of the 10th legislature with a very nice exchange with our friends from the US. And specifically, we have the honor to have today Donald Prater, which is the acting director of the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition for the Food and Drug Administration. And Mr. Prater knows very well Brussels because he was here as a representative of the Food and Drug Administration for 4 years. And he was just mentioning me that he was also in Italy. So he knows pretty well the EU. I just would like to give you some information concerning the event. So the event is hosted by two MEPs, Mr. Köhler, as I mentioned before, that is joining in a few minutes. Mr. Köhler is a new MEP and is going to introduce himself. And we are very happy that he joined immediately the European Food Forum because he was very enthusiastic of the fact to find this open forum of discussion. So let's start to explain what the European Food Forum is, because it's something important. I have to say that unfortunately, Mr. Fiocchi was informed today that he had a meeting this morning very early, and he had to take the flight to go back to Italy, and is coming back tonight. And so very sadly he cannot attend, but he could not postpone this commitment. So the European Food Forum. The European Food Forum was created at the beginning of 2019 by 5 members of the European Parliament from 5 different countries and 3 political groups. And the forum is an independent, politically non-partisan forum led and governed by elected members of the European Parliament. The forum aims to promote multi-stakeholder dialogues on sustainable food systems among policymakers, food supply chain actors, civil society organizations, research and academia, and other public institutions. It's important to say that the European Food Forum does not take position on specific policy issues. In 4 years and a half, the European Food Forum reached 87 members, including the Committee of the Regions, Yeti Food, foundations, civil society, universities, and a lot of business members and business associations. And this is amazing. So it's a real open dialogue. We did it. How is going with Mr. Köhler? I think that is almost there. Yeah. So let's say something concerning the event. The event is an integral part of the EFF initiative focused on fostering collaboration with third countries. We were extremely honored to start 1 year ago the collaboration with the US mission. And indeed, the members of the European Parliament members of the forum were invited this February to the Outlook of the Agri-Food by USDA. So a delegation of the members went to Washington, D.C., and they met the undersecretaries and they met several representatives from the Congress. So we hope to do the same, and we hope this time, next year, also to visit the Food and Drug Administration. This would be fantastic. And to have an exchange and to have back also some members of some representative from the Congress. So Mr. Prater will cover the Food and Drug Administration priorities in the area of food safety and nutrition, focusing also on ongoing collaboration with the EU. And is going also to underline the brand new Food and Drug, the Food and Drugs Administration Traceability Rules. Okay, just a few informations which are very important. After the presentation of Mr. Prater, there will be a Q&A session rules. As Q&A session, sorry. As always, the rules are the following. This is an open debate, so everyone can ask questions. Here in present, you can raise your hand and you can ask your question. Please be short. You have 1 minute. And for the ones that are following online, they can put the question on the chat, and we will ask the question. He's coming. Mr. Fiocchi, unfortunately, cannot be connected. Oh. So I think that maybe we can start now. Is coming here in 1 minute or 2 minutes? Is walking?
They are walking, yes. It's unfortunately in another part of the building.
Okay. So I think that if you wanted to do an introduction of the Food and Drug Administration, we can follow. We can start like that, and then he's coming here in 1 minute, Mr. Keller. Please.
Well, thank you very much for the warm welcome. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. We really appreciate the invitation. I'll take just a moment and introduce my colleagues, Fazla Shakir from our office at headquarters, Office of International Engagement, Katie Serrano, Director of our Europe office based here in Brussels, and Alessandro Fiorelli, a Senior Policy Analyst here in Brussels. So we are fortunate at the Food and Drug Administration to have a post here in Brussels. It's one of the few posts that we have. We don't have so many posts across the world, but we do think it's important to have one here in Brussels. And part of the reason that we have a post here in Brussels is because that we have an opportunity for dialogue such as this. We often are working with mature regulatory counterparts. We're working with legislation that is on the leading edge. And so it's important for us to have an office here in Brussels. And I'm grateful for the support from this team and also for the opportunity to meet with you all today. We are at a unique moment in the history of the Food and Drug Administration, and I'll just mention that we are about to undertake the largest reorganization in the over 100-year history of the Food and Drug Administration. And this reorganization is based in part on the foods side of the house. There are many parts of the Food and Drug Administration that will be included in a reorganization. I think we have about 17,000 employees in our agency, 8,000 of which will be a part of this reorganization. So it is quite a historic moment that we are in at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. How did we get to this place? Well, we've had some challenges, I think, with the products that we regulate. We've had some issues, I think, with infant formula. Maybe you all are aware of those issues. We are an agency that over 100 years has had a number of laws and regulations and mandates that have been made to the agency without really any opportunity to take a step and see how should we organize ourselves? How should we organize ourselves for the future, where information is being digitized, where we have analytical tools such as artificial intelligence and whole genome sequencing. These are the tools of food safety in the 21st century. And we have a very unique moment at the Food and Drug Administration where we have been allowed to take a step back and think about, it's probably as close as we will ever have in 100 years to designing an organization around food safety that we will ever experience. I tell people that I've been at the agency for over 20 years, and I tell our staff, if you've only been here 1 year, or if you've been here 20 years or 30, and sometimes we have people there 40 years, you will never have another opportunity in your career like this one to be able to think about food safety and to think about nutrition and to help us to make an agency that will be fit for the next 100 years. And so we've been working on our plans for this reorganization for over a year, and we are about to implement them on October the 1st. That's the start of our fiscal year. The organization that I currently lead, FDA Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, has a long and distinguished history, and it will be merged at the end of this month into the new Human Foods Program. And so that's what we're calling our foods side of the Food and Drug Administration, will be called the Human Foods Program. We will be bringing together our field laboratories, our field laboratory operations, and we will almost double in size under the umbrella of the Human Foods Program. We'll focus on three main pillars: microbiological safety, food chemical safety, innovation and dietary supplements in that group, and nutrition. Some of these areas have really languished in terms of attention and resources, such as nutrition. In the United States, we have a high level of dietary-related chronic disease. And nutrition will be elevated alongside microbiological food safety, which has been one of our staples, and food chemical safety. So looking at the chemicals and things, some of which are necessary as preservatives, but things we need to pay attention to. And we are going to have renewed focus on these three risk pillars. We call them the three risk pillars. In addition, we'll be looking at how we use data and information. I mentioned whole genome sequencing. It's a tool that has really changed the way that we do outbreak investigations. It can have attribution to help us to understand how pathogens are moving in the environment, in our food supply, like no other tool. We have new tools, artificial intelligence, machine learning, which will help us to analyze large data sets. There's so many tools under artificial intelligence. Think about computer vision, natural language processing. But what these tools all have in common is that they're looking at large data sets. Not that long ago, we were swimming in a sea of data, looking for that needle in a haystack. We were very challenged in terms of being able to make connections, but the tools that we have now will help us to find connections that we couldn't have seen before. And so it is so very important in how we do our work that we are establishing a new office of surveillance strategy and risk prioritization as a part of our Human Foods Program. This office will be charged with looking at how we do surveillance across the food system. We produce a lot of food in the US, but we also import a lot of food. And so looking across the entire food system in a comprehensive way takes a lot of resources, but we want to do it in a smart way, in a way that leverages data and information so that we can direct our regulatory resources, so that we make the best use of our investigators. When we go out to do an inspection or collect a sample, that takes a lot of regulatory resources, and we are in a constrained environment with respect to our resources. So we have to know at the port of entry which box to open of the 1 million boxes. If we could just improve by half our ability to know which box to open, we would make such a better use of our resources, and we would be able to find those products that have problems. The flip side of the coin is those safe products can be sped on their way to consumers. And we really want to focus on our mission for protecting consumers, because consumers have a lot of food opportunities now. There's a very diverse food supply. It comes from all over the world. It's made with very innovative processing techniques, but we have to pay attention to this, and our new reorganization will help us to be positioned for the future. So we are working on things like healthy and definition of healthy, being able to look at labeling consumers engage with food often through labeling and making sure that they have the information that they need to make healthy dietary choices and to avoid other things is really important. And so as we work on nutrition, we will also be working quite a lot on our food labeling.
Hello.
Hello, welcome. And so these are some of the things I think in our new reorganization that is really going to help us position ourselves for the 21st century. We recognize that you all are having some of the same debates. And so we're looking at things like those food chemicals. We're looking at things like ultra-processed foods. And we're looking at things that we want food to be a vehicle for wellness. So we have a new deputy commissioner. His name is Jim Jones, and he'll be the one that will lead the new Human Foods program. And he has a mission to look at food as a vehicle for wellness. So we've often thought about food in terms of safe. We want to make sure that the food is safe. And of course, we want consumers to consume healthy, nutritious food, and it must be safe. But looking at food as a vehicle for wellness is a new part of our new mission for the Human Foods program. And so we're so very excited to be able to organize ourselves in such a way that we'll focus on 3 pillars: microbiological food safety, food chemical safety, and nutrition, and also be able to utilize a new office that will help us to look at data sources and new analytical tools like machine learning and like whole genome sequencing. We recognize that there is an opportunity also to think about data sharing. And so this is also one of our challenges. We're setting up a system that will rely on data and information. The more we have, the better we can protect consumers. We can give good, appropriate advice. But one of the challenges we see in the 21st century is how do we make these data available? How do we share them among participants in the food system? And so I don't have solutions for that at the moment, but it will be a very important and integral part to how we do our work in the future.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prater. I just would like to introduce Mr. Köhler, and I'd like also to introduce other 3 members of the European Parliament. You met the 2 before, and now, which are Ms. Donazzalla, Ms. Vivaldini, and now also Ms. Cisint arrived. And I just to give some information to Mr. Köhler, I already did all the introduction. So if you want to say a few words before the presentation of the traceability, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Luisella. Okay. A very warm welcome. It's my first time here in the Fireside chat, and I'm happy that you are all interested in the work of EFF. My name is Stefan Köhler, and I'm the new member of the parliament from Bavaria. On my own, I'm a farmer, and I know what I'm talking about, and I would like to be somewhere to bring more practical things in the discussion. And I'm really happy to be a new member of EFF. Thank you, Luisella, for showing me up your forum. And I hope and wait for a wonderful work together and to share all the things we need to do. And in Germany, we have the word Lebensmittel. So the food is Lebensmittel in German, and it's a Mittel zum Leben, so a thing to live on. And I'm happy that you said it's like wellness. For me, food is medicine, and we have to have good food to have good medicine. Thank you.
Do we start to project the slides? Yeah, it's okay for you? Yeah, please, Joseph. You have just to say more slides. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, for the invitation to come and be with you here today. I'm a veterinarian by training, so sort of a farmer. I grew up on a family farm, and so it's important that we be able to produce food and have this for our consumers because we want them to eat lots of healthy, nutritious food. It helps, I think, in terms of being able to convey wellness. And so I'm very honored to be here at the European Food Forum. I think this is a very interesting group. I was based here in Brussels for a few years, and I think it was before this group existed. Okay. And so I think it's a good forum. One of the things I wanted to share with you today is about food traceability. So in 2011, we had the largest overhaul of the food safety laws in the United States, really since most of them were written in the 1930s. And this was called the Food Safety Modernization Act. And it had a lot of different rules and regulations, primarily focused at preventing foodborne disease. And so we put in place good agricultural practices, HACCP for all, we call HARP-C, preventive controls measures. But one of the important rules in the food safety modernization has to do with traceability of food. Now, in this era still, I spoke about things like whole genome sequencing and machine learning. But even today, many of the records in the food system are kept on paper. They're annotated with a pencil. When we go to investigate an issue of a foodborne disease outbreak, many times our investigators are faced with paper and pencil. One of the things that we know is that if we are going to identify the source of a foodborne disease outbreak, we need to do it quickly, and we need to do it with accuracy. When we don't have accuracy in our outbreak investigations, we are sometimes, in order to protect public health, we have to issue broader recalls or broader advisories. And that's unfortunate because much of the food that might be implicated could be safe, and it could be something that consumers could eat. And so we have new tools now to be able to help us in foodborne disease outbreaks. Whole genome sequencing, I mentioned before, with respect to those pathogens that we need to identify, it gives laser-like precision to help us to know where the source came from and where it did not come from. When a farm is implicated in the course of an outbreak investigation and it's not associated with the disease, then that's unfortunate. And so we have to try to avoid that. But at the same time, we have to balance that with rapidly removing unsafe food from the market. We've had to make decisions in the U.S. sometimes on products, leafy greens, things that may be consumed without a kill step, when we knew that an outbreak was happening, but we didn't know exactly where the source was. And this is unfortunate because it results in large recalls. It's not good for farmers. It's not good for consumers. Food traceability will help a lot, and we have new tools. And I think one of the things I'm going to share in some of these slides, if we go to the next slide. In this new rule, it was under the Food Safety Modernization Act, but we just finalized the rule recently. And so any persons who manufacture, process, pack, or hold food that are on the Food Traceability List are eligible or are covered by this rule. It also covers the entire food supply chain, including foreign and domestic entities. But there are a number of exemptions because we know that this will take some time. Let's go to the next slide. I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly so we can have some time for question and answer. This slide with the very small writing is a list of a number of the exemptions. And so we know that when we put in place traceability systems, there will be certain challenges initially. And so there are some exemptions, a number of which that are included in the Food Traceability Rule. I won't go through them all, but this is just to highlight that there are some things like certain small produce farms that are exempted from the rule. Let's go to the next slide. We have so many exemptions, we actually have a tool so that if you're a producer, you can go through and quickly find out if one of these exemptions applies. Let's go to the next slide. So the rule applies to food on the Food Traceability List. How did we arrive at this list? We actually used a risk prioritization tool. We did a risk assessment. And we published this risk assessment as part of our rulemaking process. Indeed, you can go today online to our website and take a look at the risk assessment. So it's not all foods, but it's foods that we believe have a higher level of risk. And the Food Traceability List of foods may change from time to time. So we may go back and revisit the risk assessment periodically. But currently, the rule applies to food on the Food Traceability List. Let's go to the next slide. And these are some of the things, even among those foods that are on the Food Traceability List, there are some things that make the foods on the list or not on the list. And these are some of the factors that we use in deciding that. Let's go to the next slide. So what's different now? Currently, the system that we have in the U.S., suppliers and producers retain records that are essentially what we call one step forward, one step back. You have to know who you got the product from and who you sold it to or delivered it to. But we know if we're going to have an end-to-end system, one that works rapidly and with more precision in the course of a foodborne disease outbreak, we can utilize certain additional pieces of information. These are called key data elements. And what this rule seeks to do is it seeks to standardize certain pieces of information. So what are the key data elements? And what are those critical tracking events where food moves through the system? So actually identifying critical tracking events. So you would have harvesting, cooling. A lot of these products, fresh produce, perishable, they used to go to a cooler. Packing, first land-based receiver if you're a seafood producer, shipping, receiving, transforming the food. These are all things where records need to be kept and shared. And so key data elements and critical tracking events are an essential part of this framework. And this is what's going to get us beyond one step forward, one step back. Let's go to the next slide. So here you can see a supply chain example for fresh produce. So it comes from the farm, and once the product is harvested, that's when these requirements begin to start. And one of the critical things is the key data elements at each stage of the system. So each supplier or producer or receiver or processor or distributor knows specifically what data do we have to keep. So right now, the system with the pencil and paper, they might keep some of this information. They might keep some business records, something relevant to their producer, but it's not standardized. This system makes the requirements standardized, and it identifies which types of information you can go and look very specifically at what data elements are required at each step so that everybody knows what's required. And the thread that runs between all these is something called a traceability lot code. And so the lot code is very important too. So those are the three big concepts: critical tracking events, key data elements, and a traceability lot code. Let's go to the next slide. These are just some examples. So if you are an initial packer, or if you're shipping, these are examples of some of the data elements that you might need to include. So if you look at the shipping key data elements, the first one is the traceability lot code, TLC. How much product you shipped, what did you ship, where did you ship it? Pretty basic things, but standardizing this is the most important thing. Let's go to the next slide. And this is a slide. It's pretty small for you to see, but it again demonstrates the entire supply chain, and the rule applies to the entire supply chain. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so the key concepts I mentioned: standard language, linking information by a traceability lot code. Part of the rule also is that the records just have to be maintained. There's not a regular submission to the Food and Drug Administration, but if we become aware in the course of an outbreak investigation, then records have to be provided within 24 hours. Now that's good if your information is standardized and these records are being retained. You don't have to scramble around and look for these records, and that's why you can do it within 24 hours. 24 hours is important for identifying the product and removing unsafe product from the market. But these other pieces of data and information will also make this much more narrow. So if there's a problem, it's not multiple farms that are implicated or multiple producers or distributors. It's hopefully identified to the smallest, most relevant area. Let's go to the next slide. I think this is all the same information, talks about the traceability lot code. Each one of these producers will have to have a traceability plan, and they will need to work with their supply chain partners. Let's go to the next slide. I think this might be almost to the end. And this just talks about the types of records. Right now, you can keep records on paper or electronic or true copies. But if we need the records, they have to be provided within 24 hours in the form of an electronic sortable spreadsheet. So right now it is still possible to keep records electronically, although we know increasingly information is digitized, and the records must be kept for 2 years. Let's go to the next slide. Might be the last one. Right now, our compliance date is targeted for January 20th, 2026, and this has provided 3 years for covered entities to work with the supply chain. We'll continue to do education while we regulate. We anticipate starting routine inspections against this rule in 2027. But if we have what we call a for-cause inspection, something associated with a foodborne disease outbreak, then the records would be expected earlier. But we are not going to start inspecting until 2027 to give some additional time for some of these firms to come into compliance. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so having said that, this is still quite a big undertaking. The food system is very diverse, and we anticipate that we will have to do a lot of outreach. We have done things working with solution providers. You've probably heard of solution providers that are working with blockchain or tokenized data, or using some very sophisticated and techniques to be able to gather information and share it throughout a supply system. We also did a challenge to see if this could be done at low to no cost for producers, because we know that producers, if you want them to take this up, it can't be an added burden. And so we actually did a challenge where we had several different solution providers look to see if there are ways to be able to do this at low to no cost to the producer. And we found some very novel approaches. So I think that's all the slides that I have to share. But thank you very much for the time. I'm very grateful. I'm happy to answer some questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Prater, for those very interesting slides and informations. I feel really sorry, but I have a following appointment and I have to leave now. But thank you very much for coming, for the interesting facts. And I would like to take over by Louis Zeller. I'm really sorry, but there was the voting and I was late and everything is pushing behind. So thank you very much for coming. And I will give the floor to Louis Zeller. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think that there are some questions here from the audience. Catherine from Cargill.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Prater. Thank you very much for, sorry, my voice is rougher than it normally is, with excuse. I'll try to quickly ask my question. The traceability rule that you just come to present shows how complex the food supply chain is, global food systems, right? We have geopolitics, climate change, technological evolutions that you also point out to AI that clearly have an influence on how we do business as food business operators as well. And that we need to account for and manage as food business operators. As European food industry, we've actually been calling for policy coherence, coordination, trying to avoid duplication and even conflicts that we sometimes see. You mentioned the Human Foods Program in the FDA as an overall as well. Would you be able to share some of the benefits that you expect, the opportunities that you expect, but also the challenges that you see of that coordination, which I think is also the driver, at least as I understand it, from the Human Foods Program, again, with excuses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Certainly, the food system is changing. One of the things that we know is that supply chains are becoming increasingly complex. They're coming from all over the world. There are many good things that can happen for consumers in terms of having a diversity of different products. But it presents sometimes different risks than we've seen before. So sometimes we see new hazards. Sometimes we see old hazards in new places. And so cooperation in the food system is going to be really important for the success of any of these broad measures. Right now, food traceability is really the Achilles heel of the foods system. And I say that because if we don't have sufficient traceability, then we end up in prolonged exposure when there is a problem, and we end up with overly broad recalls and other types of advisories. So it's very important, I think, to work with all the participants in the food system. There are some new solution providers, folks that aren't our typical folks. I mean, we've got folks that are, very experienced in digital products now. I mentioned blockchain is one technology that's being used now. So there are some new skill sets that are coming in to help support things like food traceability. So being able to work with the food system. One of the things that I think we've come to appreciate since we finalized the rule and have been doing a lot of outreach is this will take some time. It's important to be able to understand how food moves, particularly through distributors and distribution centers. It's complex. I've visited a number of distribution centers over the past year. And when food comes in, it gets repackaged. Sometimes it comes in with all kinds of information on it. It has all kinds of barcodes and other things. And I asked people, I said, oh, that's the tracking information. You're going to upload that into your computer system. And they said, no, we're going to put a brand new label on this, and we think we know what's in this, container, and so they will start again. And so these products sometimes get relabeled. It's very efficient for the current systems with distribution centers, but if you want to have an end-to-end traceability system, it will not work. And so we'll have to be able to find something that has more commonality throughout the system. So I think one of the things we've learned and one of the things we anticipate is that different sectors within the food system will start to share best practices. So we know in the fresh produce industry, there's a lot of labeling and coding going on already. Seafood is another sector as a result of marine stewardship and other things. There's a lot of traceability already, systems in place in the seafood sector. And so as sectors begin to share best practices with one another, I think that will help on the coordination. And I think from our standpoint, if we want this rule to be successful, we're going to need to help facilitate some of that coordination.
Thank you so much. And take the chance also to welcome another member of the European Parliament, Mr. Cavadagna. Welcome. And I do not know if you wanted to say some words. No, it's okay. Good. Other questions? I know that, okay. Please, Giulia from Ferrero.
Thank you very much for the very useful presentation. And what I would ask is, how can we include in this transition to digitalization regarding all the food safety tools, so traceability, data recording, etc., also the emerging countries, which are, according to your opinion, the steps that are necessary to do and to perform this kind of harmonization? Because this might represent a challenge for the digitalization steps in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. For this to work, we all need to come together. And so how are we going to do that? Now we have systems, our best systems are one step forward, one step back. One of the places that we have international guidelines, guidance is in the Codex Alimentarius. So there's currently a traceability guidance in the Codex Alimentarius, guideline 60. And so, but as you probably know, it's one step forward, one step back. But ways for emerging countries for this to become harmonized and emerging countries to understand it, Codex is not a fast process, but is to utilize some of these same concepts potentially. And so if you have a common understanding of what are the key data elements, if you are a harvester, what are the key things? Everybody knows throughout the system, these are the key pieces of information that we need to collect. There are tools that we can use to facilitate international harmonization, and that also will facilitate technical outreach. And so we can use some of our international bodies to help, I think, do additional training. I know that for a number of Codex guidelines I've been involved with, that's a starting place for being able to do training, education, and to help countries to be able to understand how to implement some of these systems. So it's a very good point. It will take some time.
Thank you, sir. May you take another question? One, two. I know that Dion from Mondelez, she wrote the question, so she's here, she can say it.
Yeah, so I had a very early question when I registered for the meeting. I think my question is more related to the 3 risk pillars that you were talking about. In your evaluations as a Food and Drug Administration, you use science as a basis, but I was wondering if you could elaborate on other factors that you take into account when you take decisions, for example, in the nutrition area or on topics like ultra-processed foods.
Yeah, thank you very much for the excellent question. We do always consider ourselves a science-based organization, and so we want to use the best science. We also recognize that we have to take that science and be able to use it to prioritize our work. And so this Office of Risk Prioritization we think will help quite a lot. There are a number of additional factors depending on the food safety challenge that we're looking at. But we want to use a whole range of factors to be able to make sure that we're focusing our efforts on things that have the greatest public health impact. And so using science is the basis, but then using that information and looking at things like exposure patterns, looking at consumer behaviors, I think will be other factors that will help to guide us and help us to prioritize our work. So we're looking to use much more information, but we're also looking to prioritize that information. And we want to, when we take a regulatory activity, such as doing an inspection or taking a sample, those come at great costs. And so we want to be sampling the right things. We want to be going to the right places that we think have higher risk or higher levels of uncertainty. So in the future, we will have more information on certain things, but then we will also start to identify data gaps and areas of uncertainty. And that's a place where we will direct our regulatory resources as well. So things like utilizing risk profiles will be very important. I'm aware that there are some countries that are beginning to use voluntary risk profiles. And so allowing different sectors in the industry to provide information voluntarily. You know, I've had a third-party audit, I've had an inspection by 3 countries to be able to provide that information so that we can take it into account. It comes back to the issue of data sharing and being able to use tools that will help us to not only, they're scientifically based tools, but ones that will help us to prioritize the risk and then therefore the actions that we take. That's a good question.
Thank you so much. I know that Catherine Serrano needs to leave now. She's the director of the Europe office of FDA. And thank you so much, Catherine, for everything. May we continue with another question? Okay, good. Thank you so much, Catherine. This question arrived from CNR, that probably you know because you were in Italy, which is the National Research Council of Italy, from Michelangelo Pascal. Quite technical. Are mycotoxins different than aflatoxins an FDA priority in the area of food safety for humans and animals?
Okay. And this gets back to, it's a good question. So how are you prioritizing your work? The question is, what's your priority? For different substances, we work utilizing pathogen commodity pairs. And so frequently we look at certain pathogens and their association with certain commodities, and we have pathogen commodity pairs that show up more frequently. If you look at the risk assessment that was done for the food on the Food Traceability List, you'll find that we take that into consideration. And so, yes, we are interested in mycotoxins. Yes, we're interested in aflatoxin, but depending on the commodity and where we might perceive a risk to consumers, we might take different approaches. But they are both important, and we prioritize them based on the commodity that we're looking at.
Thank you so much. Other questions? No? So we can close. Thank you really very much for this meeting, and apologize and sorry for all the things, but this is the real first week of the European Parliament.
I understand.
So it's quite confusing. And I hope that we have some time now for a quick exchange with our members, and then also with the member of the European Parliament that is here. And thank you so much. And we hope that this is the first of more often exchanges with the FDA. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.